The haunted forest nobody leaves. I grew up hearing stories about a haunted forest near my hometown. The locals called it Whisperwood, and no one ever went there, at least not after sundown. They said the woods were cursed, that if you entered them at night, you wouldn't come back the same. Some said that if you spent even a single night in Whisperwood, you'd never want to leave. Others claimed that once inside, you would hear voices calling your name, and if you answered, they'd lead you deeper into the woods, further from the familiar trail and eventually to a place beyond all recognition. And then they would kill you. But those who passed through the forest unharmed came out talking in tongues, gibbering like madmen and foaming at the mouth. One evening when I was 16, I decided to take my dog Sparky for a walk in the woods. My house backed onto the edge of Whisperwood, and the last sliver of sun was slipping between the bare branches of an ancient oak. As I walked along the path, the wind picked up and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. I knew that if we didn't get home soon, we'd be in for a night in the woods. And, as if in answer, a branch snapped somewhere ahead and a low voice seemed to call my name. Then another voice answered, this one closer and lower still. I quickened my pace, my heart beginning to pound. I felt as though I was being watched, hunted. And when I turned to look behind me, I could have sworn I saw movement in the trees, dark shapes that shifted and then were gone. As dusk deepened into night, I hurried along the path, trying to ignore the voices now a constant murmur all around me. Suddenly, Sparky whined, his hackles raised, and I heard a twig snap close by. Something was definitely out there watching us. My blood ran cold and I broke into a run. But just then, I tripped over something hidden in the undergrowth sprawling onto the damp ground. Scrambling to my feet, I turned to run, but my foot caught in a tree root and I fell again. Pain shot through my ankle and tears stung my eyes. It was then that I noticed the darkness in front of me was different somehow. It seemed to writhe and pulse like a living thing. And as I stared, mesmerized, the darkness parted and a faint light flickered through the trees. With a burst of adrenaline, I limped toward the opening, desperate to escape the oppressive gloom of the woods. As I stepped into the clearing, I gasped. Before me lay a sight so wondrous and strange that I forgot my fear and pain. A circle of mushrooms glowed softly in the darkness, their caps wide open as if in silent song. And in the center, a single mushroom blazed with an otherworldly light, casting dancing shadows on the surrounding trees. Drawn to its ethereal glow, I walked slowly into the circle. As I passed the mushrooms, I could feel their soft, moist flesh brush against my legs. And the air grew thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. The light in the center of the circle pulsed faster now, beckoning me closer. And, overcome by a sudden urge, I reached out and touched it. In an instant, the forest was silent. The trees around me swayed gently in the breeze and the chirping of crickets filled the air. I looked back toward the path, but it was as though I had never been there. Behind me, the glowing mushrooms had vanished. And when I turned back to the path, I found myself alone in a dark and unfamiliar wood. The forest around me seemed alien. The trees twisted and gnarled, their branches clawing at the sky. And as I walked, I could have sworn that the trees whispered among themselves, their voices a sibilant hiss in my ears. Fear coiled in my stomach and I broke into a run, desperate to find the path. But no matter how far I ran, the trees remained the same, an endless labyrinth of darkness and despair. Then suddenly, the trees parted, and I stumbled out of the woods onto the road leading to my house. Relief flooded me and I raced down the road, my heart pounding in my chest. Then I turned to look back at the forest, but I could see nothing but darkness. The trees had vanished, leaving only the road and the lonely oak tree at the end of my driveway. Had I imagined the whole thing? Had I really been running for my life through a haunted wood? Or was there something sinister lurking just beyond my sight? The next day, I went back to the spot where the mushrooms had grown, but they were gone, leaving not a trace of their ethereal glow. And as the days passed, the memory of that terrifying night faded, or so I thought. For one evening, as I sat at my desk, I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, there stood a tall, gaunt man dressed in a long black coat. His face was pale and drawn, his eyes dark and sunken. I knew him instantly as the man I had seen in the clearing, the man who had beckoned to me with his eerie light. He looked at me for a long moment without speaking, and I could feel my blood run cold. Then he opened his mouth and spoke in a voice that seemed to come from the grave. "You should not have come here," he whispered, his words like the rustling of dead leaves. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. I could only watch in horror as the man took a step closer. He held out a hand toward me, his fingers long and skeletal. "Come with me," he rasped, and I felt a sudden urge to obey, to follow him back into the woods. But then I shook my head, breaking free of his gaze. "No," I whispered, my voice barely audible. The man's face contorted in anger and his eyes flashed with an unearthly light. "You cannot resist," he hissed. "You will come with me whether you wish or not." And before I could react, he lunged. I screamed and stumbled back, knocking over my chair in the struggle. The man's grip was like iron and he dragged me toward the door. But then I kicked out, catching him in the groin. He howled in pain, and I used the distraction to scramble away. Bursting out of the house, I ran as fast as I could, the man's enraged screams echoing behind me. I didn't stop running until I reached the edge of town, collapsing at the side of the road, gasping for breath. When I finally looked back toward the house, it was as though nothing had happened. The man was nowhere to be seen, and the house looked peaceful in the twilight. Had I really seen him, or was I still trapped in the nightmare of Whisperwood? That night, I didn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind outside sent shivers down my spine, and I could have sworn I heard voices whispering my name, calling me back to the woods. But as dawn approached, the voices faded, and I was left alone with my fear. I knew then that I could never go back to my old life, that I would always be haunted by the darkness that lurked just beyond my sight, for I had seen what lay beneath the surface of the world, and it had changed me forever. And as the years passed, I grew older, but I never forgot the terror of Whisperwood and the man who called me from the grave. And sometimes on dark and windy nights, I still hear his voice echoing in my dreams, reminding me that some doors are best left unopened and some forests are best left unexplored. Do you believe in ghosts? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this spooky tale, please consider subscribing and joining our community for more chilling horror stories. Thanks for watching.